Grifter's Bible, a novel by El Shaboons, read by El Shaboons, with sound design by Monumental Sonic Architecture. Chapter 5. Come out to show them. Come on, Lightning, we gotta strike. Seth stepped out of the shadows in the parking garage, zipping up his fly. I wanna hit that lunchtime crowd. I threw the loop of the crude leather strap back around my neck and cinched the waist belt snug to the frame that Fat had rigged so I could schlep the tom-tom around downtown. A flock of cocky mockingbirds had been following us all day. I watched them wafting up and then dropping back down in the parking lot across the street, doing aerials on the inner-city breeze like black rags on a clothesline in the middle of a twister. The canyons of concrete were humming an otherworldly thrum as northeasterly winds gusted down Ross Avenue, vibrating off the plate glass windows in a binaural whine that sent chicken skin chasing up under the sweaty strap at my back. The temperature had dipped out of t-shirt degrees for the first time of the season, but we'd been walking all morning long, so I was warm as cooked goose. I did quick paradiddles with my fingertips on the skin of the drum while Seth and Fat discussed open tunings like priests of the esoteric chord. Fat poked his finger back into the glass medicine bottle and laid it across the nut. He executed an agile melodic run down the octave with an acoustic red glare. He looked up and smiled to see if Seth was impressed. "You're in," Seth said with a grin. "What do you mean I'm in?" Fat's lower lip was all akimbo like he didn't know how to do math. "The band, partner." Seth slapped the kid on the back. "You're killing it out here, so now I've decided I'm going to give you what you need and let you share my stage with me." "Oh." Fat's eyes lit up for a hot second and then reality snapped back and popped him in the nuts. "But I've got to work on Sundays." Fat deflated like a whoopee cushion. "You told me 8 weeks ago that you worked the lunch rush." I heard the steel trap in Seth's eidetic memory snap. Fat was about to lose his foot if he wasn't careful. "I work 10 to closing with a 2-hour shift break." Fat sounded helpless as a kitten. "When's the shift break?" The spider sneered at the fly. 3 to... "Well, there's your winner!" Pop, pop. Seth shot Fat with his finger pistols and winked. "I need you sound-checked at the church by 4 p.m. That gives you plenty of time to drive in and tune up. And bonus, you can just leave on that monkey suit they make you wear at the banquet hall." He double-juked his shoulders in positive affirmation and then went back to tooting Morse code on his harp. All of Seth's solutions were as simple as that. "But how am I supposed to get back to work in time afterwards?" Fat must have thought he still had a choice in the matter. Seth broke off some chording. "Dude, you're getting me winded. We'll talk about Sundays later. Let me concentrate on Friday while I got it standing in front of me, okay? I'm out here fighting for my life. My home. You're getting me all sidetracked with your non-pressing issues." Seth cut off the conversation when he kept his harmonica to his lips like a conch shell and wheezed a whining chord into the late morning. Like a warning to the wallets of the city, the sound sized toward the canyons of amplified pavement under the nexus of expressways that straddled the northwest quadrant of downtown Dallas. The notes broke in a hot wash off the parking garage walls, limbing the West End tourist district. Like wild boys, our street team started crawling out of the woodwork, converging from different levels on their master's call. Lester and the others began rounding corners to muster at the parking garage entrance. Already covered in ink and soot, they lightened at the sight of Brother Joe's good mood. In the blink of an eye, we went from a band to an army. Seth said the passersby could all just go around if we were in anyone's way. "Y'all got your rocks?" Seth hollered over the street team's heads. He'd had a vision on Sunday night in the wake of Don's threat of castration without full payment of Seth's back rent. The Lord had laid a heavy charge on the shoulders of our crew. The street team had spent 4 mornings walking the currents in the Trinity. Every day they had brought back a bucket's worth of the smoothest, flattest stones they could find. People have been praying to stones since they figured out how to kneel, so we painted red crosses on one side and a yellow lightning bolt on the obverse. They looked like tokens to a fair, but they were unique enough that they could have been left behind in the wake of a passing Messiah. Now, I don't want you to ignore anyone out here today. You never know who might have the Spirit of the Lord bubbling up just underneath the surface. I mean, you can't judge a book by looking at the cover now, can you? Seth bopped himself in the chest and grinned like, what, me worry? We've all got our gimp spokes to squeak by on. Just remember that we're on a mission from God today. The Lord said we had to sell every one of these stones by 4 o'clock. It's a test from the Lord. He pointed his finger up. But I know we can do it. Jang right. Lips Ahoy cawed and all the clouds rumbled. Slap daddy! Nutty fruitcakes cackled and lightning scratched the sky. Seth started huffing through his nose as he spoke. When you see someone, I don't want you to think too hard on it. I don't think any of us knew that we wanted to meet God until it happened, right? The sheep bleated their concurrence with an uproar of amens. But once we felt it, shoot, I know none of us is ever going back. Seth cocked an ear to the side and his people poured affirmation in like warm honey. And that's how most of these folks are going to be today. He paused to put up a finger. They may not know that the Lord loves them. They may not even know that that's what they really want. So just like our Lord didn't ask permission when he blew down our doors, I don't want any of you to hesitate to reach out to these folks out here today. Don't think. He grabbed a stone out of Anna's bucket. Just reach out. He grasped Anna's free hand and put one of these stones in there. Anna looked like electricity was coursing through her body at Seth's touch. Then you tell him, this is your key to salvation. Now give me $10. Say it just like that. That's the way they do it. Tell them, don't sell them. Don't even open up the possibility of taking no for an answer. It works. You're not asking them. Tell them this is what they got out of bed for this morning. Tell them this stone is the missing piece of the puzzle. He began to pick up volume. The parking attendant across the street observed the commotion like a curious owl. Tell them all that this stone is the sign of the Lord. Tell them all that this stone is the first step on the path. We're building a road on that path. Now tell every last one of them that the road begins at the first electric church. All the people squeezing by on the sidewalk must have thought we were on a day trip from the loony bin. It looked like Fat and I were taking a sleeve of crackers to the aquarium. Tell them all! Seth twanged with his hands above his head. Let everybody know. He got my blood boiling, even if I knew it was all smoke. The others never stood a chance. All right, y'all. Let's show them what Jesus can do. Seth clapped his hands before the muster and I pulled my sticks out of my back pocket, ready to strike up at his sign. Fat blew on his hands and rubbed them together, trying to get warmer. Seth turned and started clapping in syncopation as he walked towards Houston Street. He never looked back. It was always up to the world to catch up with him. Who got the power in Jesus' name? Seth had spent the week writing Jodies in his own honor. We got the power, I'm glad you came. The flock had spent all week learning the proper responses to his marching calls. Who's got the power that's starting to grow? We got the power we cannot show. Fat and I started edging through the responses of the moving body, high-stepping our way towards the vanguard so we could lead the crew when it was time for the music. Who's here? He's here. Who's here? You're here. We're here. You're here. No one has a living fear. Seth lifted his hand to the side and snapped his fingers twice so Fat and I could see. Now tell me who's that riding? Joe the Revelator. He extruded a stoic sing-song that echoed out of the chasm of time. The street team crooned in unison at Seth's back. Fat put the glass of steel and let a languid siren sound off of the fretboard. A dark horse had come to town and the campaign for souls was on. We tracked all the way down Houston until we made our way to Dealey Plaza. Then Seth turned to cut a swathe past El Centro. We decamped on any street corner that was clogged with any sort of loitering coterie of hoi polloi, pausing at all of the bus stops and crosswalks along the way so Seth could yuck it up with the pedestrians. The street team was hawking their wares wherever we went. Our escort of mockingbirds was bolstered by a squadron of pigeons we passed riding the thermals over one main place. Seth boot-heeled through our repertoire with a gusto like thunder until even the stiffest shirts from the service types in the West End, every crone, yinta, and biddy at Neiman Marcus, were forced to connect with him in some tangential recognition of his substantial charisma. As we marched our entire hymnal past the Federal Building and the old courthouse, Seth went to work grabbing the attention of the suits. He held throwdowns with rapid clutches of smoking secretaries outside the Bank of Nations building. To the wonder of all, not least of which was me, our tail began to swell. It took 7 days of 7 priests blowing 7 breaths through 7 ram's horns while the Ark of the Covenant was paraded in a circuit around the city of Jericho before the walls would fall to the army of the Lord. Seth came on like he meant to take the whole of Dallas in a solitary afternoon, armed with little more than 3 chords and an elevated sense of his own self-worth. If he couldn't hornswoggle some straggler into following along with our group, he'd toss him to the street team and let them wear out the naysayers with nuclear-powered peer pressure until they had no choice but to drop their refusals, buy a stone, or follow along. Our fly-posting squadron was without scruples when it came to blanket marketing. After 4 consecutive night shifts spent on paper-hanging raids, the name of the First Electric Church of Jesus Christ had been slapped onto the face of every valet stand, pasted up and down every construction site wall, and stuffed in the front windows of every newspaper rack in the city. We walked down construction paper corridors with Seth's half-toned face turned up to heaven on wheat-pasted walls. I saw him taped outside the plate glass picture windows at all of the boutiques and behind the bars of every check-cashing joint. He shared advertising space with all of the liquor store pinup girls. Every donut shop had flyers taped up next to the register. As our gathering reached a critical mass, all the lonely people looked up at the growing noise attendant with our arrival. We drew close in a cloud of rumble and chaos. People's faces dropped when they saw the size of the crowd that had built up behind Seth. It's weird what the power of a moving multitude can do. Spinoza said that the prosperous don't give a damn about advice, but those mired in the quicksand of adversity will clutch at any helping hand to drag themselves out. Suckers in a crunch have to pray for whatever angels they can muster to make it through the day. Who the hell's walking around the city banging a drum? Unable to explain the sight before their eyes, the skeptics threw their employment sections into the trash and put a hitch in their giddy-up to catch up with this roaring legion. You at least had to follow. You at least had to see where this would lead. It felt like the whole world was on our side, carrying us in a wave towards a forum. Pegasus Plaza is an open-air pavilion that sits at the corner of Ackerd and Main. It was a flame for wavering moths in those days of malaise, and there was always a crowd just sort of lingering. Seth dubbed the place Preacher's Corner in his own honor and ordained himself its official minister. That's where the street team rallied on a daily basis. They had been telling the city for a week that a solution was at hand, and their persistence was so consistent that by that Friday, a crowd of the left back, the remanded, or the just plain curious had turned up to see if all of these weirdos were passing bunk knowledge, or if they were onto something hot. Nutty Fruitcakes and Lips Ahoy had forgone the second half of our walking parade to run ahead and prime the crowd. When they saw Seth marching down Main Street, they got everyone to clap and chant his name. Brother Joe! Brother Joe! Brother Joe! The crowd at our back followed suit. Brother Joe! Brother Joe! Brother Joe! Getting drunk on the sound of the crowd, I shut my mouth and tried to take it all in. My mind whirled as gawkers stepped out onto the sidewalk to stare at the horde. We bowled them over as we clattered down Main, chugging towards the elevated granite space, bolstered by a mob. Window washers turned from their temporary aeries to watch from above. A Lone Star electric truck followed us for blocks. A lone yellow Dallas Public Works hard hat swiveled like a gopher peeping out of an open manhole trying to locate the source of our noise. The sound of my sticks clicking off of the drum hoops ricocheted off of the adjacent plate glass as everyone took a breather at the red light. Adjusting my strap, I looked across the intersection at Ackerd and saw Pegasus Plaza was already packed with punters. They were waiting for a plan. They were waiting for the man. I just started laughing at all of the attention Seth was attracting as we waited for that light to turn green. Seth turned and gave Fat an A on the harmonica. The mockingbirds and pigeons flew ahead to the pavilion, landing in the bald cypress and willows, jockeying for good limbs. Fat was ready for action after a couple more turns of the tuning pegs, and he gave the 12th fret a scratch across the strings. This is what the crest of a wave sounds like. The light turned green at the exact moment that Seth started singing. The crowd on the plaza whistled and clapped to hail the throaty rover's arrival. The flock at our back urged him forward with a shout, and he escorted them on through the crosswalk. Propelled like a torpedo, Seth hit the crowd with a splash. Like a politician, he shook poor men's hands and kissed ugly women, and never once did he stop singing and mugging for cell phones. Seth saw faces he knew from previous treks into the city, and he stopped incessantly to wave or point at them, making sure that they knew that he knew that they had shown up to support him. We moved forward a few inches through the throng, and Seth saw a girl sitting by herself. He pulled her up from her perch with a laugh and twirled her into a quick dance down the aisle as he pressed on towards the stage. He gave her a dip and a twirl and then released her back into the melee before moving on to the next mark ripe for bedazzling. Seth wasn't the sweetest singer in the history of pitch, but his lyrics came out of him so clear, and he was such an agreeable siren, that when he got to refrains like "How does it feel to be loved?" the entire plaza lifted off into a monumental chorus of unbridled joy as we all roared his query for 3 minutes straight. Fat strummed until he drew blood. I kept watching his hands, waiting for a string to break beneath the throttling he was delivering. He grimaced. He stuck his tongue out. Blood smeared on the pick guard and spread like jelly. Fat just played harder and the strings held. My eyes were burning from stinging sweat, but I just had to shake it off. Seth jumped onto the elevated platform in a single leap as Fat slashed through the closing cord behind him. The crowd jumped and hollered their approval as they rushed forward. Seth egged it all on, leaving Fat and I to get up on stage as best we could before the wave of people tore us apart in their fervor. The man of the hour paced the platform and clapped.
Yeah, yeah, yeah! All right, all right, all right! Y'all like fruit? How about them apples, huh?
The newborn congregation yowled their approval right in my ear. I felt someone slap me on the back as I hauled myself up, red-faced and puffing onto the stage. I turned around and Nutty Fruitcakes handed my drum up to me. I forgot to thank him because when I stood up and saw the size of the crowd that had gathered, I forgot everything. We're gonna need a bigger church, I thought to myself. I snapped back into the zone and set the drum down so I could hold Fat's guitar for him. Jim gave Fat a boost on the caboose until the kid could get both boat feet planted on the platform. Fat took his guitar back and rechecked the tuning while Seth paced the stage, puffing on the harmonica like 5 alarms. Once Fat stepped to the back, Seth dropped the harp and spoke.
How many of y'all know what it feels like to have your options dropping from your hands all the time?
There was muffled clapping with moderate zeal.
That's the way I've done for years now, y'all. I know exactly how it is.
Seth panted into the air and tooted on the harmonica like a tweaker whenever he didn't have breath for words. His fingers tapped on the tin reeds even when he wasn't looking.
Shoot, I seen times going all wrong, and people, I got down so low I didn't know how I'd ever get back up right again. I tell you what, these past few years have taught me this. Existence is brutal and resistance is futile unless you got someone like Jesus on your side. How many of y'all know where I'm coming from?
Easy applause is still applause.
I got to where it was getting harder to convince myself to get up and try just like everybody else. I mean, you know it's hard, yeah? When you get that low, you wake up scared and you don't want to know. It's hard. I know that's right. That's what it is. I've seen them days.
They were already with him by then, and Seth was just milking the vibe for gold.
It's hard, yeah? When you get down that low, huh? Dang right it is. I took hard knocks until I was punchy. I'm stupefied right now, dude. You said it. That's exactly how I was too, brother. But look at me now.
Seth's hands verified that he was whole. I watched them watching him. They were rapt. He loved it.
Look at me, man. I'm smiling like I ain't got a care in the world. I'm bebopping down the boulevard like I got balloons in my shoes and helium on my back. Who you?
A stray voice mused.
My name's Joe and I'm for Jesus, and I'm gonna boogaloo down Broadway shouting out the good Lord's name until I get every last one of you to follow me.
The placid smiles of the sheep broke into emphatic giggles as Seth unspooled all of his ridiculous jingo. I looked down at them, but they only looked at him.
I'm gonna tell you right now, sisters, brothers, I opened myself up to taking about as many punches from reality as I could stand before I pretty much give up on thinking there was anything like God up there at all, much less someone that was looking out for my sorry hide. I only followed one of Jesus' teachings, and that was turn the other cheek. That's right. I turned the other cheek and looked away from God every chance I got, y'all. Man, sakes alive. Man, not only did I not believe in God, I hope there wasn't no such thing. I didn't need all that judgment people talk about. Didn't want eternal salvation. I probably prayed on that, y'all. I ain't stunned one bit.
Seth cultivated chuckles with a gobsmacked strut.
They say when you ride like the lightning, you're gonna crash like the thunder. I mean to tell you, I went down hard down that road of drinking and smoking and doing whatever I could to try and fix that hole in my heart that I was staggering around with. Man, I was putting up them bricks.
He stacked up symbolic fortifications with his empty hands.
I was building up a wall around that hole in my heart as high as I could get, y'all. And I kept on building and building until I just about cut myself off from all of the light.
He stopped pacing and his last word echoed off the faces of the buildings. I looked out at the crowd to watch their watching faces.
And right as I was putting in that last brick, the one that was gonna cut me off from happiness for good, that's when Jesus Christ himself come right up to that wall I'd spent so long building up. And you know what he done? Preach it. Let it swing. Go on now.
Seth wound himself up like a big leaguer.
Oh, that's when Jesus walked right up and walked the monkey snot out of that wall. Knocked them bricks all over until I tell y'all what. I thought he might have come to bury me.
Sister Boogie hooted.
Oh, girl, you know that ain't how Jesus does. For sure. Jesus didn't come to bury me. He come right up to that hole I'd been digging myself into and...
Seth spread his legs and put his fist on his hips.
Jesus looked me in the eyes and said, "You see me standing right here staring at you, boy? Am I real enough for you yet? I'm here. It's now. So let's do this thing. Let's get you whole again, son."
Seth choked up on his own phony narrative. He recovered and his tone was vehement.
The man that pulled me out of that hole was no weak lamb. You hear me? He was strong and he was real. He was as real as I'm standing here in front of y'all telling you how good it feels to be saved. Amen? Amen.
The crowd was so loud I took a step back.
How many of y'all think Jesus ain't real? How many of y'all built up your own walls?
Seth had that crowd in his sway and he tangoed with their emotions.
Who's out here trying to find a way to get by?
He cried out. They groused back.
Who ain't? Man, I hear you. I looked in the help wanted section this morning before I come up here, and you know what I saw? Let's hear it. I'll tell you flat out. I saw every one of y'all's faces. That's exactly what I saw. We got us a whole city out here. We got a whole country full of good, hard-working folks that just need some help. But it's the way of the devil, and he's been running his game so long that some of y'all don't know what to believe anymore. Lay it out. Make it plain. Do y'all believe?
Seth panted.
That's all I want to know. Are y'all believers or what?
The volume of their need to believe filled the pre-rush hour with an added frisson of mounting electricity. The musk of the misbegotten floated freely in the air like pollen.
How about it, y'all? How many of y'all are scared? How many of y'all keep getting up in the morning to find out you're down a little lower than you were yesterday, huh? How many of y'all think you're just about beyond hell? How many of y'all would change your tune if you really saw the good Lord standing right there in front of you, just like I'm doing today? How bad y'all want to see him? What's that worth? What if he came along and told you everything was gonna be all right? What would y'all give to have Jesus come along and take the wheel?
The street team was savvy from years of independent panhandling in order to survive, and they knew how to pick out money marks in a crowd. They dispersed into the multitude to wherever they saw fit. Chester Drawers and Lips Ahoy were walking the periphery of the throng, clapping and testifying, tamping the crowd from the back. Near the front, Lester yelled,
"Come on now, with it! Hit that you for him one time, Brother Joe!"
I was listening to Seth's spiel with half an ear when I noticed Cerebellum hobbling up to the edge of the crowd. After that initial treatment with the magnets, Sarah had started to improve quicker than most of the other indigent souls that had been attended at our debut. She cleaned up almost as completely as Lester had. But that Friday she shuffled up looking all tipsy, dazed like she'd backslid into the pimp hand of God. Her head was wrapped in bloody bandages again, the same way I'd seen her decked out for the past 20 years.
It doesn't take much. How about y'all? How deep down can you reach? I know I held some of you up from your lunches today, so I imagine you still got your eating money on you.
Seth raised his eye.
The day's getting late, and there ain't a one of us out here that couldn't use a bit of nourishment for our souls. Come on, y'all. God says give him 10% of everything you got. I'm willing to settle for just $10. In exchange, I'm gonna give you one of these prayer stones that y'all see all of my ministers holding up out here.
I saw Jim Jim holding the handle of a bucket with both hands while Fujitsu rotated solemnly with his fists thrust up in the air, displaying 2 of their prayer stones. Seth boomed.
Take this rock, and you bring it to my church this Sunday. That's where God will change your life in every single way. Change? Say, boo, you got some change for me?
I heard a familiar mewling approaching the front of the press. I looked down and Cerebellum was peeking out of the front row, looking like weather-beaten dog shit. She looked about as feeble as I'd ever seen her, and her eyes were dull inside like some sort of daze. Her shoes were gone and her pants were half undone. Her dirty blouse was buttoned up, all cockeyed. She was a mess. I was shocked as she squeezed her tiny frame through to the front. She reached out for Seth's leg, and I felt a strange pang of regret that she had somehow regressed all the way back to the state that we had found her in before that first Sunday. We'd watched her do a complete 180 in days, but there she was back at less than 0. I thought she had been doing better, but she wavered like a reed in a sea of shoulders. Sarah's spidery hand scratched at Seth's sandals, and her tired face crept slowly towards his feet. The women of the flock were already fraught, but with Sarah there, they were overcome. Their eyes swelled and went red, wet, and hot. The men looked away like they didn't want to witness Sarah's wretched groveling. Seth let the silent moment dangle until he had regained every eye. His finger went up.
Y'all are gonna have to hold on a second. I think this might be the real reason why Jesus told me to get down here today. He said it was important that I come out here. I can see now that it is.
He knelt and clutched Sarah's bandaged head in both hands. She made a play to pull away, but Seth made a greater show of holding her ears firmly as he stared down deep into her eyes.
Do you want to see a little change, girl?
Seth put his open palm on the back of Sarah's head, and her shoulders bucked at his touch. He kissed the fingertips on his other hand and touched them to the side of the bandage where it was pink with a thin gruel of claret. When he took his hand away, Sarah shook her head and put her own hands over her ears. The sheep in the crowd dropped their final pretenses and gawked at the genuine miracle that was taking place before their naked eyes. The flock bawled in silent awe. After a moment that felt like something had happened to the barometric pressure, Seth leaned over, whispered in Sarah's ear, and then withdrew, still holding her gaze. The crowd was dead silent, and even the traffic noise seemed to fade out beyond the periphery of awareness. Seth nodded at Sarah, and she nodded back. The crowd leaned forward, trying to see everything that was going on. Sarah stood up straight like a good girl and turned around to show off the lift in her shoulders. Her chin was sitting high. Her smile came on like rain in the Dust Bowl. Fats started softly chording. Sarah began patting her palms together in time with Fats playing. I started tapping on the tom-tom, and Sarah hopped around in her bare feet on the cold flagstones. We connected eyes, and I could see that she knew what she was doing. She knew that she was helping out. Seth began singing along as Fat comped his way through the opening of He's a Mighty Good Leader for the 5th time that day. With her eyes closed, Sarah shook her head with abandon, and the sloppy bandage began to unravel as she clapped. Fat started to pick up steam. Seth jumped off the platform and grabbed one of the unfurling ends of Sarah's bandage. He began to pull as she did a little schottish step. Fat's flustered face became a study in bloody concentration as he chugged down the tracks, feeding coal to the engine of a train bound for glory. Sarah turned like a dervish as Seth held onto the bandage, and she didn't stop until her head was completely uncovered. She was set free. Seth walked over humming to one of the fountains and dipped the bandage into the water. Seth lifted his fist full of dripping pink cotton and took it back over to where Sarah was doing a little side-to-side shimmy in her bare feet. Seth wasn't gentle. He walked up right behind her and squeezed his fist above her head. The runoff from the rags cleaned the blood from her forehead until it was finally revealed that her wound was about as healed up as it had been a few nights before when I had helped her reapply the silver gel to her healing temple. He wrung out the bandage. She flinched and screeched like a cat. I thought, Jesus, I bet that's cold. Once she had recovered from the shock of the water, Sarah threw her arms to the sky and twirled in place like a little kid set loose after church. Steph took her hands and danced with her like she was the queen of the prom. When Fat brought the song to a close, the audience surged forward to touch Seth and Sarah. And if they couldn't get close enough to him, they waylaid the street team, buying up all of Seth's token stones like they were tickets for the last train to heaven. When the rocks were all gone, Seth was still busy shaking hands. Fat and I jumped off the riser and fanned out. I went to collect the money for the prayer stones from the street team. Fat went to get an empty bucket from Jim so he could walk the crowd to take more donations. My hands are streaked red and my nails were ruddy from too much friction with the drumsticks. I worked gingerly around my open blisters as I carried the bucket through the crowd. Seth greeted his people with Sarah at his side. She was once again whole and smiling. As beleaguered as our audience was, most of them managed to peel off something to pass on to Brother Joe, who had performed a miracle on that poor lady, all while singing about the Bible like a man on fire. I bowed and thanked them for their gifts and handed them a flyer, inviting them to come on by on Sunday. I was finishing my circuit through the crowd when I turned around and saw Don's two huge nephews, Billy Goat and Beryl, lumbering over to where Seth was getting his megalomania sucked off by a throng. Immediately, I started running around to anyone from the street team that I hadn't already collected money from. Seth had his hands up to placate the two as they pulled him out of the crowd. I chased them across the plaza as they walked away down Main. Seth and I squeezed into the bucket seat of Billy Goat's old truck, stock still as cadavers with our buckets of cash spilling over between our knees. In a dinky wood-paneled office near the eastern terminus of Elm Street, Don blew plumes of blue smoke and rattled my nerves, gesticulating to the fluorescent heavens with a gnawed-off El Producto Excepcionale cigar in one hand.
I'm not counting it.
Don rested his open hand on the pistol lying barreled forward on the desk.
You two shitheads get to work.
I watched myself squirming in the reflection in Don's aviator shades. I wanted to cry, but you can't. There's nothing else to do but take a deep breath, move carefully but decisively, and pray that our whole week of shenanigans had bought Seth, and now somehow me, a reprieve from a miserable execution. We sat there in front of Don's desk, smoothing out all of the cash ties so they would fit into the bill counter. Billy Goat and Beryl's shadows lay long over our work, and the whole time we were sorting the bills, Don's fingertips were twitching on top of the grip of the pistol. About an hour later, Seth and I put our last stacks together and Billy Goat slammed his hand down around the final wad before Seth could scoot it over to Don. Billy Goat slid all of the stacks over to his uncle and Don started dropping the different denominations into the counter. The bills sounded like machine guns humming as they were rifled. It was unnerving. I watched the counter. It was my salvation. I watched Don's fingers. I looked back at Billy Goat sneering. Beryl was nonchalant. I looked over at Seth. I looked across at Don.
Son of a bitch.
Don spit out a shred of wet tobacco and tipped his Stetson to the back of his noggin.
That's a whole year and a half's rent.
He pointed at the red digital numbers. I saw the tiniest white of his teeth peeking out from behind Don's thread of a smile.
Dang slick.